Good morning, everybody. This is the Men's Sunday School class here at Mercy Baptist Church. Uh, my name, of course, is Robert Rathbone, and I'm recording, I'm doing Sunday School lesson this morning from home because temperatures last night got down to like around 10 degrees, and we've been having heating issues at the church building, so Greg thought it might be best that we postpone the worship service to like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where we've had time. The sun's up, the day's warmed up, and we've had more time to get the sanctuary up to a reasonable level for us to be relatively comfortable in the sanctuary. So we are waiting till 2 o'clock for the worship service. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and do the Sunday school lesson here from home. So hopefully you can hear me well enough to hear what I'm saying as we go over Sunday school. And we're going to be actually covering through about this lesson. The book has us hopping and skipping from a few verses here, a few verses there, through across about from chapters 15 of 2 Samuel through chapter 18. It's covering the description of Absalom's rebellion against his father and his attempt to take the kingdom away from his father. And we kind of saw last lesson, that Absalom kind of glimpse of how he's a planner. He patiently plans out how he's going to do things, how he's going to get his revenge or get what he wants, and he is willing to work at it for years at a time. We saw last week that he apparently planned out his revenge against Amnon, his half brother, for raping Absalom's sister, his full sister, Tamar, and he waited 2 whole years before he exacted his revenge. And here, this lesson, we're going to see Absalom. He's still conniving. He's still planning. He waits. Well, he works for 4 years, wooing the people. He's gets them to see him as potentially a better king than his father. That he cares about the people and David doesn't. And so once he feels like he has the people on his side, that's when he puts his plan into motion. As far as actually, he's been working under the radar, and then he goes into full aggressive tilt, and David's forced to flee for his life. So before we get started, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you again for your love, your mercy, and grace. Thank you for sending Jesus Christ, Lord, your Son, to die on the cross for our sins, Father. And we just pray as we study your word this morning, Father, that you would teach us and help us to see, Father, and learn more about you and what it takes to please you, Father, and how we can be redeemed through your blood. So, Father, just bless this lesson and use it for your glory and honor, Father. For it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Alright, our book has us starting in chapter 15 in the first verse. Immediately before this, Absalom even though David had allowed Absalom to come back to Jerusalem, he would not. He said, Absalom can't see my face. He refused to see Absalom, And then after 2 years, Absalom finally put his foot down and said, "Look, why'd you bring me back? You know, if you weren't going to let me see your face, because seeing his face was tantamount to being forgiven." And so when he finally does, Absalom does see his father kisses him, and that kiss symbolized the forgiveness and reconciliation between Absalom and David. And so now that he has become forgiven, that effectively clears his name, and so he's no longer a fugitive. And so the first verse of 2 Samuel 15 says, "And it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him." Alright, so now Absalom is starting his, I guess you could call it a campaign, to steal the kingdom from his father. People already admire him for his good looks, and now he is exercising these symbols of royalty. He has chariots and horses, and then it says 50 men to run before him. Back then they would have men that would run ahead of the king or some important person, announcing their arrival. They were acted as heralds. Make way for Absalom. Absalom is coming. That sort of thing. And so he had chariots and horses. It was kind of like with the chariots and the horses, it was kind of like he had how the officials and people in office will have a motorcade, with all the police escorts and all the flags on the cars and all that mess. Absalom's sort of doing the same thing. He's got his chariots and his horsemen. He's got the men that run ahead of him to announcing his arrival, and so he's doing all this to impress the people, so he could have the appearance of being important, that he's the king's son. He's not a fugitive any longer. He is somebody to be respected, and so he's doing this to impress people and get them to like whenever somebody is campaigning to run for president, there's a certain value to being able to look presidential. That you look like somebody that could important enough and is competent enough to be able to do the job. That's what Absalom's doing. He's wanting to impress everybody, make it look like he is somebody impressive that can do the job of being a king. So verse 2, it says, "And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate, and it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is one of the tribes of Israel." So not only did he want everybody to be impressed with his importance, he also would get up early, I guess presumably every day that when people would come with a controversy. And the controversy, kind of the equivalent of if you had a lawsuit or an issue with somebody and you took them to court. This is the equivalent of it. People would come to the gate the gates of a city was usually where important matters like that were heard, and either the elders or the city officials would be there at the gate, and they would hear your complaint, and they would and I guess they would hear the defense of the person that you were complaining against, and they would judge, who's in the right, who's in the wrong, what should be done. And so Absalom would get up early. He would make sure he was there first thing, and he would stay there, I guess pretending like he's an official, that he is somebody that could obtain justice for people. But notice what he does when he goes there. It says, when any man had a controversy came to the king for judgment, they were wanting justice for whatever reason. All right. Then Absalom called on him and said, of what city art thou? And he said, well, thy servant's is of one of the tribes of Israel. He's trying to act like, much like politicians do today. They want to pretend that they are interested in you and what your needs, what you want, what's going to help you, that sort of thing. And Absalom's doing that very thing. He acts like he asks, hey, where are you from? What city do you come from? And the person would, this is a generic person that's being quoted here. And he said, thy servant's one of the tribes of Israel. I'm from wherever. And so he's pretending that he's really interested in them. He's on their side. Then it says, and Absalom said unto him, see, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. And Absalom said moreover, oh, that I were made a judge in the land, that every man that which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. Alright, so now he's feigning empathy with the person. He's pretending like whatever the person, the person could be coming with an unjust cause, that he's not being reasonable, and because he's complaining because his neighbor's doing this, that, or the other, and he thinks they shouldn't, or whatever. Whether the person's cause is just or not, he says, see, thy matters are good and right. He says, he agrees with him. He says, I'm on your side. He tells the person basically what they want to hear. And then he says, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. He says, king, if the king cared more about you, he would have somebody out here ready to hear your matter and get you justice. And then he says, moreover, even in addition to that, he says, oh, if only I was a judge. He said, and any man that would come to me, for judgment, he said, I would do him justice. I would make sure that he got what he needed, he would get what he deserved. I would do justice. So he's implying that his father, his administration is letting the people down, that people can come to the king and get for justice and not get it. And Absalom saying, if I was a judge, I'd make sure you got justice. So he's pretending here, big time. He's doing like modern politicians that are insincere. Some of them, I'm sure, genuinely want to do a good job and serve the people, but then you got others that they are they'll say anything to get them elected. They'll promise all sorts of stuff and then totally forget those promises once they get in office. That's kind of what Absalom's doing. He's promising all this stuff and making people think that he'd be the better king than his father David, and yet it's all a lie. It's all an act. Verse 5, it says, and it was so that when any man came nigh unto him to do obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. So the Hebrew word that's translated there, to do him obeisance, it means to bow down. So anybody come up to him and would try to show him the respect as a king's son, and try to want to bow down to him and show him the respect, Absalom would pretend that he didn't care about those things. He would he put forth his hand and took him. In other words, he'd take the man by the hand or lift him up from, you don't have to bow down to me type of thing. And it says, and he kissed him. So he's pretending to treat the man as an equal, and that say, hey, I love you. I'm here for you. That the idea is that my father and his administration, they're up there. They don't care about whether you get justice or not. But he says, I'm for you. I mean, don't this sound just like a politics today? They he wants to. Absalom's trying to get these. He's really laying it on thick for these for his fellow Hebrews, fellow Jews, and so verse 6 it says, and on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So he's doing this day after day. He gets up early, goes there, and anybody that comes, it don't matter who they are, whether their cause is just or not. He would pretend like, hey, I'm a champion of the people. I am here for you guys. And so it says, he did this to all of Israel who came to king for judgment. Anybody that came, he would do this. This is how he would treat them. And so Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Men started looking at Absalom as this man. He cares. He empathizes with me. He knows what's going to be just. He wants to see justice for me. And if they vote, they didn't vote for their kings back then, but if they did, they'd be like, my vote is for Absalom. I favor Absalom. And so it says Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Their loyalty started moving from David to Absalom. Alright, then our verses skip down to verse 13, but I think it's in verse 7. It says, and it came to pass after 40 years. Now the commentators point out that the better, or the older manuscripts, and presumably better manuscripts, some of them say 4 years, and that sounds more realistic than 40 years, because David he was only reigned as king for 40 years. So this did not transpire. In the first 7 of those years, he was only over Judah. He was not over Israel. So it couldn't be. This really couldn't be 40 years. So 4 years sounds more realistic. So most likely this was 4 years, and so Absalom has been doing this, wooing the people, trying to win them over to his side. He's been doing this for 4 years, and apparently there comes a point where Absalom feels like he has enough support of the people that he can go ahead and overthrow his father and take the kingdom from him. And so in verses 7 through 12, Absalom goes to Hebron, and he begins using this as his base of operations and executing his takeover of the kingdom. And even Ahithophel, which was David's best and I guess most respected advisor, he went to Hebron to join Absalom. Now apparently Absalom's activities are noticed, because it says, verse 13, it says, and there came a messenger to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And so this people start seeing what Absalom's doing, and or I guess certain people that's still loyal to David, they see, Absalom's gone to Hebron. Ahithophel has gone there as well. They start realizing Absalom's up to something. I guess they realize Absalom's planning a coup or a takeover of the kingdom, and so they send a messenger to David. It may even been people in Hebron. Maybe it gets out what Absalom's planning, and and they send a messenger. They may have been the ones that sent the messenger, but anyway, a messenger comes to David saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom." It's like, David, you're losing your kingdom, because they have turned and they favor Absalom above you. Alright, so verse 14, it says, "And David said unto his servants that were with him in Jerusalem, Arise, let's flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword." So David realizes, he decides that the best thing to do right then, I guess tactically, is to run, to flee, to get out of Jerusalem. And notice that last phrase, it says, "and smite the city with the edge of the sword." I think not only is David being caught, I guess, unprepared, I think he's trying to minimize loss of life and damage to the city, because if the idea, he's expecting Absalom to smite the city with the edge of the sword, that Absalom's going to come, besiege the city, and attack it, and do whatever he has to do to capture and or kill David, and anybody that he has to kill in order to achieve that goal, he would probably be willing to do. So David thinks, let's flee, because if we stay here, we're not going to escape from Absalom, because Absalom's going to know where he's at. We can surround the city. So he said, "Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword." So I think he's thinking of the people, the city. He doesn't want to see Jerusalem destroyed or wrecked, but from a battle, from civil war, and he doesn't want to see innocent civilians killed. So he says, let's get out of here. So verse 15 says, "And the king's servant said unto the king, Behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. And the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house." So, David's servants there, the king's servants, in the, I guess they're within his house and close to him. They're still loyal. They are ready to do whatever David decides is the thing to do. If it's stay and fight, they'll do that. If it's to run, then they'll do that. And so it says, "The king went forth and all his household after him, but he leaves 10 women which were concubines to keep the house." I guess this is a practical consideration, so that while he's gone, he wants them to stay there, keep the house, take care of everything. Then let's see, verse 17. "And the king went forth, and the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and the Cherethites, and the Pelethites, and the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king." All right, so the king has left the city. He's left Jerusalem. They've gone a certain distance, and then it says they tarried at a place that was far off. So they wait for this band of it says 600 men. This band of 600 soldiers. So apparently these were mercenaries, foreign mercenary soldiers, Cherethites, Pelethites, and Gittites. That apparently they had gotten word from David that they needed to come to him, so they probably came to be as a bodyguards to protect the group as they are leaving in case they got attacked. Alright, so skipping down to verse 30, it says, "And the people went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and went up weeping as they went up." So they're climbing as they're leaving Jerusalem, and they're going up Mount Olivet. Olivet's like something like a mile or half a mile, I forget exactly, but it's just a very short distance from the actual city of Jerusalem. Because you remember, Jesus would climb the mountain. He would go on to Mount Olivet, and then he'd look back at the city, and he could see the temple, and so it was close by enough that you could see. But David is leaving. He's going up Mount Olivet, which is the Mount of Olives, and they were going barefoot, and they covered their heads, and these were all expressions of grief and mourning, and they're weeping as they climb the Mount Olives, because they're grieving over the turn of events that's happened here, that over his expulsion from Jerusalem. Alright, now our book has us skipping to chapter 16, verse 15. And there it says, "And Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him." So Absalom has now arrived at Jerusalem. He's left Hebron and come to Jerusalem, and he apparently is expecting, he's come ready to fight, to try to take over the, to try to take over, to take the throne, to take the kingdom, to take control of Jerusalem. But he finds that David has fled, and so a battle is unnecessary. And Ahithophel, which is David's advisor, is there with, he's accompanying Absalom. And about Ahithophel was the grandfather of Bathsheba, and apparently he is not forgiven David for stealing her away from Uriah, and the fact that David had Uriah killed. And so he may be thinking that joining Absalom is going to enable him to get his revenge, or get David what he deserves, what he thinks David deserves. And so that might be reason why Ahithophel is not as loyal to David as some of David's other servants. Verse 20. It says, Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give counsel among you what we shall do." And Ahithophel said unto Absalom, "Go into thy father's concubines, which he hath left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Then all the hands of all that are with thee, then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong." Okay. So Absalom's found that the kingdom is his for the taking, because David's no longer there. And so he asks his advisors, and Ahithophel was the head advisor. So he asks them, he said, what his first order of business should be. And in those days, when a new king took over, whether he inherited it from his father, or if he took it by force by killing the previous king or whatever, he would inherit, it was the custom of the day that he would inherit the previous king's harem. And so that's what these 10 concubines that David had left behind to watch the house, that's what they represented, was David's harem. And so Ahithophel advises him. He says, "Go into thy father's concubines." In other words, avail yourself of what concubines are there for. To lay with them, to sleep with them. And I'm thinking Ahithophel is remembering what David did with Bathsheba. That David took the wife away from Uriah, and so he says, look, he says, you go in there to those concubines, and that would be in his mind, he's probably thinking that would be a just thing. That would be just what David deserves. That's just what, that's just the sort of thing that sin that he committed against Bathsheba and Uriah, but for his son to take his concubines. And this act also fulfills the judgment that Nathan had spoken, from the Lord back in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. But that another man would take his wives from him. So he says, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. In other words, that's going to be there'll be no coming back from that once he's taken his father's concubines. He says, they'll hear that thou art abhorred of thy father, and then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. In other words, they're going to realize, this ain't something you're just going to turn around and decide, whoops, I made a mistake, or have second thoughts about, that you are in it. Kind of the idea that, hey, Absalom is here to stay. I'm going to be, I'm here to, I'm not going to change my mind and try to ask forgiveness of my father. I'm here to stay. I intend to go through with all of this. All right. So then we come to chapter 18 of 2 Samuel, verse 14. We're kind of catching this right in the middle of something here. It says, Then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. And he took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and slew him. Alright, so a lot has happened here in between, and we don't have time to go into all of it, but by this time David's had time to rest. He's been able to regroup and prepare for battle against the forces of Absalom, those that are loyal to Absalom. And so David's soldiers have engaged Absalom's soldiers in battle, and were defeating Absalom's soldiers. And as a result, Absalom is fleeing now on a mule, and he's riding through a thick forest. His head gets caught in the low-hanging tree branches above him. Commentators point out it's kind of unclear if he kind of got his neck caught, or got caught like maybe in the fork of a branch or something other, and he couldn't get loose, or if it was, or if he just got snaggled, his hair tangled up in the branches. But however way it happens, he's hanging there, and the mule just rides out from under him and leaves him hanging there, helpless, because he can't get down, he can't free himself, and he's just hanging there helpless by this hair that apparently by his hair, which is something that he's always been proud of, and it, as often happens, pride of the things we are proud of ends up as being our Achilles heel. But one of David's soldiers sees Absalom hanging there, and he's afraid to do anything because David had given strict orders that Absalom was not to be harmed. Yes, Absalom was the enemy, but he was also David's son, and David did not want Absalom to be harmed, to be killed. And so this soldier comes and he reports to Joab what he saw. And now Joab is anxious. He says he's hanging there helpless. Well, so he says, look, I may not tarry thus with thee. In other words, I don't have time to waste stand here gabbing with you. I gotta go, because he's wanting to get to Absalom, and obviously he wants to end this rebellion as quickly as possible. So it says, and he took 3 darts, or that is 3 spears, in his hand, and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. So Absalom's hanging there helpless, and here Joab comes and he takes 3 spears. He wants to do the job thoroughly. I guess any job worth doing is worth doing right. So he takes 3 spears and jabs them through Absalom's heart, because I'm sure Joab knows that's the quickest way to kill somebody. And then it says, and 10 young men that bear Joab's armor compassed about and smote Absalom and threw him. You know, the 3 spears, it's pretty sure that Absalom was dead, and yet these 10 men, they get their strikes in, whether it be with spears or swords or whatever, but they attack Absalom's body, and they essentially make sure he's dead. You know, I don't know if they started whacking off body parts or what they did, but he, you know, it's absolutely certain that Absalom is dead. Alright, so now we go to verse 32, and at this point, you know, Absalom's dead, and so Joab blows his horn that recalls all the soldiers back. You know that, hey, you know, the battle's over. You know, come on back. You know, regroup, go back to base camp, whatever. And now, and once they've done that, Joab sends a man named Cushi to as a messenger to report back to David of how the battle went. And so verse 32 says, and the king said unto Cushi, is the young man Absalom safe? And Cushi answered, the enemies of my lord the king, and all that rise against thee to do thee hurt, be as that young man is. So Cushi has arrived. He's told him, he says, you know, Lord's given you victory, given the king victory over his enemies. You know, that hey, you know, we've won the battle, but David's first priority is Absalom. And so he says, is the young man Absalom safe? And Cushi answers that, you know, the enemies of my lord the king, and all that rise against thee to do thee hurt, be as that young man is. Like, you know, that's the implication. You know, obviously the enemies of my lord the king, you know, you want them to be dead, and all that rise against thee to do thee hurt, you don't want them to be dead. And he says, you know, may all of your enemies and those that would rise against you be as that young man is. So the implication there is that that young man, which is Absalom, oh, pardon me, you know, he's dead, and because he's saying, I wish all of your enemies would be just like him, you know, would be dead. And so David understands he's dead. And so verse 33, he says, and the king was much moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, thus he said, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son, my son. And so it says the king was much moved. You know, David loved his sons. He mourned for, I think, 2 or maybe 3 years. I think it's 3 years for Amnon, his oldest son, who was murdered. But and so David, when he mourned for his son, he mourned. And so if he's beginning to do what he did for Amnon, now he's doing it for Absalom. And so it says he went up into the chamber over the gate and wept. You know, it's kind of like he wanted to find a place by himself, away from everybody, so he could weep and mourn over his son. And it says that, and as he went, he said, thus he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom." So, in spite of Absalom's rebellion, and it's quite possible that, even probable that Absalom would have killed David, his father, but David still loved Absalom, and apparently he wanted to end this rebellion quickly and hopefully to be able to rehabilitate his son, but things didn't work out that way. So now he's grieving over him. And then he says, "Would God I had died for thee, O Absalom, my son." So not only now he obviously loved his son, and he's saying, "Look, I would have died for you. I would have took your place if it had been possible." He said, "Would to God, if God would have allowed it, I would have taken your place and died in your stead, Absalom." But I also think that maybe he might have felt some guilt and responsibility for Absalom's rebellion, because these things had come about as a judgment from God because of his sin with Bathsheba, and because Nathan had told him, "Lord, thus says the Lord," he says, "You're going to be trouble or adversity from within your own family," and so it may be that David felt some responsibility there, that this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't followed my lusts and had sinned with Bathsheba. He might have thinking this was my fault, and so he's saying this is why I would have died, or given David an additional reason. He probably wanted to die for his son because he loved his son, but also because this is my fault. The judgment, the punishment should have been on me, not on you, Absalom. But he's grieving over his son. All right, so next week, that's all the verses we got for this week. But next week we'll pick up, and apparently David retaking the throne is not just as simple as him going back to Jerusalem and sitting down on the throne. There's some complications to that, and it could easily be still repercussions of the judgment of David's sin against Bathsheba, that things weren't just that easy, and because some of the hearts of the people, they were not quite ready to welcome David back. But we'll get into that next week, which I think it'd be starting about chapter 19. So we'll pick up there next week.